Welcome, my friends. What if I told you the country that was once America's most loyal partner, a land of glittering desert parties and Western music, became its most dangerous enemy in a single night? This is not a political theory. This is the story of a divorce that changed the world. For 40 years, the news has shown you angry men shouting, burning flags, and talking about war. But that is only the surface. Today, we are going to dive deep. We are going to look at the secret handshakes, the broken promises, and the silent games played in the dark. This is not just history. This is a story about trust, betrayal, and the price of power. And if you listen closely, you won't just learn about geopolitics. You will learn English. Real English. The kind that isn't in textbooks. The kind that describes pain, ambition, and survival. So turn off your notifications. Close your eyes for a second, and let's step into the desert. We begin with the end. No warning, no trial, no chance to say goodbye. Just a silent drone in the dark sky, a flash of fire, and a single red ring left in the ashes of a burned car. This is how the most powerful commander in the Middle East met his end. But to understand why that drone was in the sky, we have to go back. We have to go back to a time when the sky was filled, not with missiles, but with champagne corks. Part 1. The Golden Cage and the King of Kings. The year is 1971. We are in the middle of the Iranian desert, near the ancient ruins of Persepolis. If you were there, you wouldn't believe your eyes. In the middle of the dust and sand, a city has appeared. A city made of gold and silk. This is the Golden City, built by the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. He wants to celebrate 500 years of the Persian Empire. But really, he wants to show the world his power. He invites kings, queens, and presidents from all over the globe. He flies in 18 tons of food from Paris. He flies in 50,000 birds to sing in the trees. He serves wine that costs more than a house. The music is loud. The jewelry sparkles under the desert sun. The Shah stands tall, wearing a uniform covered in medals. He looks like the master of the universe. But there is something the camera's done to show you. Imagine the Shah of Iran trying to lead his people while wearing a crown made of gold, but his feet are sinking into the sand. He was carrying the weight of a dying empire, and the people below him were starting to pull him down. The Shah had a vision. He wanted Iran to be modern. He wanted it to be the Japan of the Middle East. He built roads, schools, and factories. He gave women the right to vote. He was America's best friend in the region. He was the policeman of the Gulf. Washington loved him. Hollywood stars visited him. But he made a fatal mistake. He forgot his own people. The Shah thought he was buying friendship with his billions of dollars in oil. But let me tell you the truth, you cannot buy loyalty. You can only rent it. And the rent was about to come due. While the guests at Persepolis ate food flown in from France, the villagers just a few miles away were hungry. They had no electricity. They had no clean water. They looked at the golden tents in the distance, and they didn't feel pride. They felt rage. Outside the golden tents of Persepolis, a young boy watches the plains. The king was dreaming of the past, but the people were starving in the present. Fly in food from Paris. He is hungry. His father tells him, "Don T, look at the king. Look at the dirt. That is where we belong." The Shah was surrounded by yes men, people who told him he was loved, people who hid the truth to keep their jobs. He lived in a bubble of wealth, disconnected from the soul of his nation. He didn't see the mosques filling up with angry young men. He didn't hear the cassette tapes being passed around in secret, tapes recording the voice of an old man in exile. That old man was Ruhollah Khomeini. Khomeini was everything the Shah was not. The Shah wore expensive Italian suits. Khomeini wore black robes. The Shah drank wine. Khomeini drank water. The Shah loved the West. Khomeini called the West a poison. As the 1970s went on, the gap between the rich and the poor in Iran grew wider. The oil money made the rich richer, but inflation made the poor poorer. The Shah's secret police, the Savak, arrested anyone who spoke out. Fear was everywhere, but hunger is stronger than fear. By 1978, the streets of Tehran were burning. Millions of people marched. They didn't want a king anymore. They shouted, "Death to the Shah!" The police fired into the crowds, but for every person who fell, 10 more stood up. The Shah was confused. "Why do they hate me?" he asked. "I built them schools. I gave them a future." He didn't understand that you cannot feed a soul with concrete. He didn't understand that dignity is more important than a highway. In January 1979, the Shah looked at his country one last time. He walked to his private plane. He was crying. He took a small box of Iranian soil with him and he flew away, never to return. The party was over. As someone who has seen how empires rise and fall, I can tell you that the Shah didn't see the end coming. He thought the party would last forever. But remember, the loudest music often hides the sound of the door breaking down. Part 2. The Divorce and the Black Wave. The king was gone. The vacuum was open. And nature hates a vacuum. On February 1st, 1979, a plane from France landed in Tehran. Millions of people flooded the streets. They climbed on cars, on trees, on roofs, just to get a glimpse. The Ayatollah is flying back to a country that is screaming his name. He looks out the window and makes a strange decision. A reporter asks how he feels after 15 years in exile. He says nothing, no joy, no fear, just a cold, hard mission. Hitch. Nothing. That one word told the world everything. This was not a man of emotion. This was a man of duty. He wasn't there to be a politician. He was there to build a kingdom of God. In just 10 days, the old system collapsed. The army surrendered. The radio announced, "This is the voice of the revolution." Overnight, the music stopped. Alcohol was poured into the sewers. Women who wore miniskirts yesterday put on the hijab today. The Japan of the Middle East vanished, and the Islamic Republic was born. For America, this was a nightmare. They had lost their best friend. They had lost their policeman. And soon they would lose their dignity. The Shah, sick with cancer, asked America for help. He needed a hospital. President Jimmy Carter agreed to let him enter the U.S. It was a humanitarian act, but in Tehran it looked like a plot. The revolutionaries thought America was planning to put the Shah back on the throne. On November 4th, 1979, a group of students climbed the walls of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. They took 52 Americans hostage. The Shah had spent decades as America's policeman in the Gulf. He was left in the sky, flying a plane with no place to land. But when the revolution came, his friends in Washington stopped answering the phone. He realized that in power, there are no friends, only interests. The embassy takeover was supposed to last a few days. It lasted 444 days. Imagine a black wave of water rising from the desert. It doesn't care about your palaces or your tanks. It just washes everything away. That was the revolution. It was a force of nature that no one could stop. Every night, for over a year, American television showed images of the hostages, blindfolded, scared. It humiliated America. It destroyed Jimmy Carter's presidency. It created a deep, burning anger in the American heart. Most people focus on the 444 days the hostages were held. But the secret isn't the time, it's the trauma. Those days didn't just break a treaty, they broke the American psyche for 40 years. Before 1979, Americans looked at Iran and saw a friend. After 1979, they looked at Iran and saw a monster. They saw burning flags. They heard the chant, "Death to America," the great Satan. But let's look inside the embassy for a moment. Imagine being a diplomat trapped in a room for over a year, hearing the crowds outside, screaming for your death. You don't know if today is your last day. You realize that the world you knew has vanished, and you are just a pawn in a game you don't understand. This event froze the relationship between the two countries. It was like a block of ice that never melted. Diplomatic ties were cut. Sanctions began. The divorce was final, and it was ugly. But life in Iran wasn't a paradise either. The revolution promised freedom, but it brought war. In 1980, Saddam Hussein of Iraq attacked Iran. He thought Iran was weak. He was wrong. The war lasted 8 years. It was brutal. It was like World War I. Trenches, chemical weapons, waves of young men running into machine gun fire. Hundreds of thousands died. But something strange happened. The war didn't destroy the revolution, it saved it. Nothing unites a people like a common enemy. The Iranians fought with a desperate bravery. They weren't fighting for the Shah anymore. They were fighting for their land, their faith, and their survival. This war created a new generation of leaders. Hard men. Men who grew up in the trenches. Men who learned that the world doesn't care if you die. Men who decided that Iran must be strong enough to never need help again. One of those men was a young soldier named Qasem Soleimani. Remember that name. Maybe you feel like the world is changing too fast for you to keep up. The people of Iran felt that too. They traded a king for a leader, and soon they found that the chains were just a different color. We are all just trying to find our way in the dark. Part 3. The Paper Hope and the Great Betrayal. Fast forward 30 years. The war is over, but the Cold War between Iran and America continues. Iran has learned a lesson. If you want to be safe, you need a big stick. So they started building a nuclear program. They said it was for energy. The world said it was for a bomb. Tensions rose. Israel threatened to attack. America tightened the sanctions. The Iranian economy began to suffocate. The people were tired. They wanted normal lives. They wanted to be part of the world again. In 2013, A new president came to power in Iran, Hassan Rouhani. He was a moderate. He smiled. He spoke English. He said, "Let's talk." And in America, President Barack Obama said, "Okay, let's try." Secret meetings began. In Oman, in Switzerland, diplomats sat in fancy hotels, drinking coffee, trying to solve 30 years of hatred. You were about to see behind the curtain of the nuclear deal. It wasn't about science or energy. It was a desperate attempt to stop a clock that was ticking toward a global explosion. It was a mask of peace over a face of war. The negotiations were hard. The hardliners in Iran hated it. "You can't trust America," they said. The hardliners in America hated it. "You can trust Iran," they said. But in 2015, they did it. They signed the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The deal was simple. Iran stops building the bomb. The world stops the sanctions. Imagine reading 100 books about peace while you are building a bomb in your basement. That is what the world feared. You can sign all the papers you want, but if the fire is still burning in your heart, the paper will eventually turn to ash. But for a moment, the fire seemed to cool. President Obama signed. The sanctions lifted. Billions of dollars of frozen money flowed back into Iran. In Tehran, people danced in the streets. They thought the nightmare was over. Boeing and Airbus signed deals to sell planes to Iran. European companies rushed in to build hotels and factories. Iranians bought iPhones. They drank Coca-Cola. They felt like the world finally accepted them. But history is cruel. The dream is over, the sanctions said. Then the door slammed shut. You are still the enemy, the world reminded them. For a few years, Iranians bought iPhones and drank Coke, thinking the world finally loved them. And the hope died in the streets. In 2016, Donald Trump was elected President of the United States. He looked at the deal and saw weakness. He called it the worst deal ever. He surrounded himself with men who hated the Iranian regime. He wanted to destroy Obama's legacy. On May 8, 2018, the world watched. Donald Trump sat at his desk in the White House. He held up a piece of paper. He signed his name with a thick black marker. And then he held the paper up to the camera. He withdrew America from the deal. Ask this question. If you corner a cat and leave it no way out, what will the cat do? It will scratch your eyes out. The world thought sanctions would make Iran surrender. But they forgot that hunger often leads to rage, not peace. Trump called his strategy maximum pressure. He wanted to squeeze Iran until it broke. He sanctioned everything: oil, banks, metal, even medicine became hard to find. The Iranian currency, the rial, collapsed. In 2015, $1 was worth 30,000 reals. By 2019, $1 was worth 150,000 reals. Today, it is over 500,000. Money became worthless paper. Middle-class families became poor overnight. Fathers couldn't buy meat for their children. Patients couldn't find cancer drugs. The world signed a promise in 2015. But in 2018, one man held up a pen and crossed out the signature of a nation. In that moment, the trust that took decades to build vanished in 3 seconds. Iran realized that a promise from the West is only as strong as the next election. The hardliners in Iran, the men with the beards and the guns, looked at the moderates and said, "We told you so. We told you never to trust the great Satan." And they were right. In the eyes of the Iranian people, America had proven itself to be a liar. What feels like a betrayal is often a lesson in reality. Iran learned that they could never rely on the West. This pain was forcing them to look east, toward new friends who didn't care about their rules. The door to the West closed, but the window to the East was opening. Part 4. The Shadow Commander and the Red Ring. This brings us back to the man we mentioned earlier, the soldier from the trenches, Qasem Soleimani. By 2019, Soleimani wasn't just a soldier. He was a legend. He was the commander of the Quds Force, the secret arm of Iran's military that operates outside the country. What if I told you the most feared man in the Middle East, the Shadow Commander, lived in a simple house and called himself a humble soldier? He didn't wear a uniform with medals. He wore a gray jacket and a smile while he moved armies across 4 different countries. Soleimani was a genius of asymmetric warfare. He knew Iran couldn't beat America in a direct fight, so he built a network of friends, militias, proxies. He built Hezbollah in Lebanon. He supported Assad in Syria. He armed the Houthis in Yemen. He controlled militias in Iraq. He created an axis of resistance. The sanctions were like a heavy stone tied to the neck of every Iranian family. But Soleimani took that stone and used it to build a wall. He turned the isolation of his country into a weapon of resistance. Soleimani was everywhere, but he was nowhere. He would appear on a battlefield in Syria, drink tea with the soldiers, and disappear before the enemy knew he was there. He was the architect of Iran's power in the region. He was the second most powerful man in Iran. To his supporters, he was a hero, a protector. To his enemies, he was a terrorist, a man with blood on his hands. Donald Trump wanted to send a message. He wanted to show Iran that maximum pressure wasn't just about money. On January 3, 2020, Soleimani flew into Baghdad Airport in Iraq. He felt safe. He moved openly. He got into a car with a convoy. He didn't know that high above him, an American MQ-9 Reaper drone was circling, silent, invisible. He was not made to kneel. He was simply erased. There was no battle, no honor, just a button pushed in a room thousands of miles away. At 1:00 a.m., the Shadow met a Reaper. The man who had survived 100 battles was gone before he heard the sound. The explosion rocked the airport. The car was a twisted wreck of burning metal. When the first responders arrived, they couldn't identify the bodies. They were burned beyond recognition. But then they saw a hand lying in the dust. On one of the fingers was a large ring with a dark red stone. It was Soleimani's ring. The photo of that hand circulated the world in minutes. Twitter exploded. World War III started trending. Iran vowed severe revenge. You might think this was the end of the story. But in the Middle East, a martyr is often more powerful than a living general. Iran wasn't broken by the loss. They were hardened. They were being rebuilt into a force that had nothing left to lose. Millions of people filled the streets of Iran for his funeral. It was the biggest crowd since the death of Khomeini. They weren't just mourning a man, they were mourning their dignity. America thought they killed the head of the snake. But they forgot that this snake has 1,000 heads. You don't stop a movement by killing a man. You only give that movement a reason to fight forever. Iran fired missiles at U.S. bases in Iraq. No Americans were killed, but over 100 suffered brain injuries from the concussions. It was a warning shot. We can hit you. But the real revenge wasn't the missiles. The real revenge was the shift in strategy. Soleimani was dead, but his plan was alive. Just smoke, twisted metal, and the smell of jet fuel in the desert night. And just like that, the man who held the Middle East in his hand was gone. But the ring on his finger remained, a red eye staring back at the world, promising revenge. So now, take a breath and look at the map. The pieces are moving faster than ever. Don't look away now, because the game has just entered its most dangerous phase. Part 5. The new game, the dragon and the bear. After Soleimani, after the failed deal, after the sanctions, Iran made a choice. If the West wants to accept us, they said, we will go east. They looked at the map and saw two giants who also had problems with America, Russia, and China. The bear and the dragon. You are about to see the Ghost Armada, hundreds of ships moving silently across the dark oceans with their trackers turned off. They are carrying the lifeblood of Iran to China, bypassing every law and every wall the West has built. China is hungry for energy. Iran has an ocean of oil. It's a perfect match. China buys Iranian oil in secret. They pay in yuan, not dollars. They help keep the Iranian economy alive. It's a lifeline. And then there is Russia. In 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. The war didn't go as planned. Russia ran out of missiles. They needed cheap weapons. Iran raised its hand. We have something, they said. They sent the SHAD-136, a suicide drone. It's simple. It's cheap, only about 20,000. But it works. In the skies over Ukraine, people hear a sound like a broken scooter. It is cheap, it is simple, and it is changing the way wars are fought. Buzzing, buzzing, buzzing. It is the sound of an Iranian drone. The student has become the teacher of destruction. For decades, Iran bought weapons from Russia. Now, Russia is buying weapons from Iran. The tables have turned. This is the new axis. Iran, Russia, China. They are building a new system. A system that doesn't need the U.S. dollar. A system that doesn't fear U.S. sanctions. But while the leaders play this global game, what about the people? A young girl in Tehran looks at her phone. She sees a world she can never touch. Her money is worthless, her future is locked, and her leaders are old men who speak of a revolution she never saw. She is caught between a past she hates and a future she can too reach. The average age in Iran is around 30. The leaders are in their 80s. There is a massive gap. The young people don't care about the great Satan or the axis of resistance. They want jobs. They want freedom. They want to wear what they want. In 2022, a young woman named Mahsa Amini died in police custody because her hijab wasn't worn correctly. The country exploded again. Woman, life, freedom. The government cracked down. They turned off the internet. They arrested thousands. They executed protesters. They proved they can still control the streets. But can they control the hearts? Iran is sitting on an ocean of oil, but its people are drowning in poverty. But the truth is, Iran is poor because it chose power over prosperity. Most people think Iran is poor because it has no resources. It is rich in the earth, but empty in the pocket. So where does this story end? It doesn't. We are living in the middle of the chapter. Iran is closer to a nuclear bomb than ever before. The alliance with Russia and China is growing stronger. The tension with Israel is at a breaking point. The Shah's party is long gone. The ruins of Persepolis are still there, watching the history unfold. Empires rise, empires fall. Kings run away, ayatollahs pass away, but the land remains. As someone who has watched this game for a long time, I want you to remember, no empire lasts forever, and no enemy is permanent. The world is a wheel, and it is always turning. What looks like a dead end today might be a new path tomorrow. The story of Iran and America is a tragedy. It's a story of missed opportunities, of pride, of misunderstanding. Could it have been different? If the Shah had listened to his people, if America had apologized for the coup in 1953, if the hostage crisis hadn't happened, if Trump hadn't torn up the deal, maybe. But history doesn't care about what if. It only cares about what is. And what is real right now is that the world is dividing again. The walls are going up, and Iran is standing right on the fault line. You are not just watching a story about Iran and America. You are watching the birth of a new world. The game is no longer about who has the most bombs, it's about who has the most friends. And right now, the map is being redrawn while we sleep. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope it opened your eyes, not just to the politics, but to the people, to the complexity, to the truth that is never black and white. This was a lesson in history and a lesson in English. If you learned something new today, if you felt the story, then subscribe to the channel. Because we don't just tell stories here, we explore the world, one truth at a time. Stay curious, stay strong, and remember, the game is always being played.